Alright guys, well the title of this video pretty much says it all. This is a comparison between the GNS by LT Wright knives and the Genesis by LT Wright knives. The short of it is, since I reviewed both of those knives, I've received at least 3, 4, 5 times a week a question by a YouTuber or a Facebook user, friend, whatever. Which is the better knife, the GNS or the Genesis? What's the difference between the two? You know, which one do you like better? And you know, I have a hard time verbalizing that through text, and so finally I just decided, let's put this to video. Kind of just lay it all out there, and I'll go ahead and say, guys, when I say that I think this knife is better at this and I think this knife is better at that, it pretty much boils down to my personal skill set and personal preference. These two knives are on the exact same playing field as far as I'm concerned. They're both made out of quality tool steel, albeit different tool steels. They do have different grinds, they do have different blade profiles, they do have different handles, but they have one thing in common: the same maker. And I have 4 knives from LT Wright Knives, and they're all quality, they're all great craftsmanship. I mean, they're bomb-proof. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I just wanted to share that with you. Keep that in mind. A lot of this is my own personal preference, but I hope to highlight what I think are the differences between these two to help you guys make a more informed decision if you're kind of wavering between these two knife styles. So anyway guys, let's get down to it. Alright, well let's go ahead and get the general specs out of the way first. I'm not going to go, you know, all the way into the nitty-gritty. I'm just going to hit general here. This is the Genesis, this is the GNS. You guys probably know that already. Genesis comes in at right about 9 inches from tip to stern, and the GNS comes in at right about 9.5 inches. The handle's a bit longer. I'm going to save the handle overview till the very end, but I have a particular reason for that. The Genesis, the depth of the blade is about 1.25 inches, and the depth of the GNS is about 1.125 inches, a hair over. The GNS is made out of 01 tool steel. The Genesis is made out of A2. Only difference there is that I've noticed, and on paper even, if you read, A2 holds an edge longer. It's a bit harder to hone up in the field, whereas 01 is easier to hone up, but it doesn't quite keep the same edge. You know, honestly, in the field, these knives are obviously very used. I have used these quite a bit, and it shows. There's not a huge appreciable difference. If you keep your knife maintained, there's not a huge difference whatsoever that I've noticed. The 01 on the GNS, this one has taken a natural patina pretty quick, whereas the Genesis, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit dirty, I just got done doing some work with it. It hasn't yet. You know, it does mark up, so not a big deal either way. Both of them keep a good edge and stay razor sharp really well. Alright guys, on to the difference in the grinds. The Genesis is a Scandi, and the GNS is a saber grind. The saber here on the GNS does have a secondary that's convexed, which is great. I think it helps it out a lot. The Scandi on the Genesis, it does, from LT, have a minute secondary on it. I don't really know what to call it. I think they call it a secondary micro bevel, something like that. It's due to their polishing of this bevel. That process just produces a minute secondary. It's hardly even noticeable. Now, I do think, speaking of the bevels, as far as splitting ability, I do think because of the length of this bevel, or the graduation, or how long it takes to graduate to the full thickness of the blade, I do believe it does split just a minute amount better, but not so much so that you can tell on a video. So I'm not going to show you that. Now, where these grinds really become apparent, and this is pretty much where I'm heading with this whole video, there are 2 things, or 2 activities in my mind that really show the differences between these different grind styles. So let's get on to that. First and foremost is going to be feathering, and secondly is going to be actual push cuts, whether it be pushing through, you know, trying to cut a tree down or a sapling down or something like that, or I just grabbed this for an example, cutting out notches in a bow drill set. So I'm just going to try to show you a quick example of the differences between those two. Alright, we're going to start with the GNS. Alright, I'm not going to beat this into the ground. As you can see, it easily produces nice, tight, fine, paper-thin curls. As does the Genesis, but as far as skill level goes, not quite as easily in my opinion. Not quite as naturally thin, but that goes back to my skill level. So Scandi likes to dig in deep, whereas the Genesis, out of all Scandis I've used, it doesn't have the natural Scandi overbite like I like to call it, but it still likes to dig deep. So as a direct comparison, there's the GNS and there's the Genesis. The Genesis, the Scandi, easy push, just wiggling it back and forth, digs right into the wood. As you can see, got in there, don't pay attention to the bottom, got in there pretty good. I don't know, 1/8 of an inch, almost 1/4 of an inch. Alright, GNS. Considerable more force because it does not like to go in there, but that's because of the wide grind of the saber. Lots more force and only half as far. So in my opinion, the Scandi is better for push cuts. However, flip the coin, the saber is better for feathering in my opinion. Alright, the difference in the blade profiles, grinds aside, this one is girthier, obviously, so it's heavier. It equates more balance in my opinion, but that goes into play with the handle style as well. This one's more narrow, and what I really like about this one is just the way the angle is set up. No matter where you're cutting with it, whether it be at the tip or at the base, that it's the angle of your wrist really doesn't need to change. Even if you're cutting up here, back to here, the angle of your wrist is exactly the same. Now another great point that I really like, and I realize this is unsafe, this is not what I normally do, but for the sake of the camera so you can see, because the point is so fine here, you can get into some fine work and really get in there and do it finely, because the back of your blade is not getting in the way with your notch. Whereas with the Genesis, it can be. You have to dig out more and pivot against the back side of your notch to get it to work. Now, I mean, it's not a huge deal. I'm just pointing out the fine differences of these two. All right, they both share the same ability to strike a ferrule on their spine. All right, gang, let's talk about handles. First of all, the handle on the GNS is right at 5 1/16 of an inch, something like that. The handle on the Genesis is 4 1/2 on the dot. Obviously, there's some differences here. This one is what you would call a broomstick style. It's very comfortable, in my opinion. In fact, it's probably my favorite overall that I've used. Now I will say, just to hold it, it doesn't really feel that comfortable. I mean, it just feels like holding on to a stick. When you get to use it, there's a gradual taper from butt to front, or however you want to call it. It feels natural. It allows for a progression of torque that is just easy. The somewhat rounded edges don't allow for a lot of twist in your hand. The bead blasted micarta, it grips your hand no matter if you're sweaty or not. It's great. I love it. Now, the GNS. I honestly don't know what to call this. Obviously, you have a finger guard up here, and I guess a pinky guard back here, whatever. To hold it, to let it rest in your hand, it is insanely comfortable, and to use it, it's great. until you have to put a lot of torque on it. And this is just back to personal preference. I have huge hands, probably giving an average of the United States or US American males. I have large hands, and it seems like back here there's not enough meat to hang on to. So if I have to put a lot of force into something, I don't have anything to hang on to back here, and so it's like all my grip goes into my first 3 fingers, and my pinky's just kind of along for the ride. Really, I don't have a lot of twist action to it. Now that being said, if under general light use, you know, feathering, stuff like that, anything beyond push cuts, this thing is comfortable. It is insanely comfortable. It's like it belongs in your hand. So it's really a crapshoot. It really depends on the size of your hands and your personal preference. The reason I save the handle comparison to the last is because, just to throw this in there as an extra, these are both a Genesis. This one is a 1 Foot in the Wild edition, and this one's just a regular edition. I heard that the 1 Foot in the Wild edition is a hair thicker, and given that I have large hands, I thought, hey, I can't lose. So I looked around and I eventually traded for one, and I have to say, it's nice. It is a hair thicker. Let's see, I actually haven't measured this before. Let's give a close-up here of something I noticed. Pardon me. I don't know how well this is going to translate into camera, but as you can see, it is just a hair thicker. At the same time, the edges are just a hair more rounded. Doesn't really seem to affect its workability any. We're looking at an 1/16 on the 1 Foot in the Wild edition, and about 15/16 on the standard Genesis. Alright guys, I've been trying to close this video up for a few minutes. My kids are playing with their friends, and things are getting kind of crazy in the background here. For that I apologize. But to answer the question that a lot of people have asked me, which is a better knife, the Genesis or the GNS? Frankly, only you can answer that question. I've tried to outline the differences, and they're very subtle differences really between the two today. The GNS, it shines at feathering, but the Genesis isn't far behind in my opinion. The GNS is more of a natural featherer, so if your skill set isn't quite up to, you know, what the feathering gods are, I can name a few people, but I won't, then the GNS will allow you to get those really fine, really curly feathers that everybody likes to see online. You can do it with the Genesis. It's just not quite as easy. This one is a little bit better at splitting, but it's not so much better that you could really show it on video. It's just, it's something you'd have to feel. I think the Genesis, the push cuts, because of the Scandi grind, it shines a lot more on video. It's a lot easier to get those push cuts. I mean, there's not a lot of force involved, and you can get the job done a lot easier. I think the handle is a lot more comfortable under hard use on the Genesis. However, on the GNS, the handle, just to sit in your hand, it feels like it belongs there, until you have to put a lot of force behind whatever you're cutting. So I mean, it's really give and take. It's up to your body style, it's up to your preferences. So guys, the point of the video was to kind of outline the subtle differences between the blades, and hopefully that will help you make a decision between which one would better fit your needs. But guys, thanks for joining me. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.